Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something that might shake you up a bit. You don't have a money problem. You have a tahanking problem. That's right. Most people walk around saying, I'm broke. I can't afford that. If only I had more money, I'd change my life. But let me ask you a question. Is it really about the money, or is it about how you tie K about money? Because here's the true thing. Money is never the root issue. Your mindset is money doesn't solve problems. It only amplifies what's already going on in your mind. Let me give it to you straight. If you put a poverty mindset into $1 million opportunity, it will shrink that opportunity right down to nothing. But if you put a wealth mindset, even in the middle of a tight budget, you'll find ways to expand, create, build, and multiply. Money is not your master. You are the master, but only when you master your mindset. The reason you're stuck is because you're not working hard. It's because you've been trained to think small. You've been told, be realistic. Money follows mindset, not effort. That statement might seem counterintuitive to most people, especially in a world where hustle culture is glorified, where waking up at 4 a.m. and grinding until midnight is worn like a badge of honor. But here's the reality. Hard work alone does not produce wealth. If that were true, the hardest working people would be the wealthiest, and we know that's not the case. People working 2 or 3 jobs, sacrificing sleep, health, and time with their families are still struggling. So the equation must be deeper than just effort, and it is. It starts in the mind. The truth is, your external financial condition is a reflection of your internal belief system. If you believe money is hard to come by, that belief will shape your actions, your decisions, and your outcomes. If you believe people who are wealthy are greedy, or that there's a limited amount of money in the world, you will subconsciously sabotage your ability to attract and retain wealth. Why? Because your mind will always find a way to make your beliefs true. Your mindset is the operating system, and money is just the application running on it. A corrupted system will crash even the best software. People don't get paid for how hard they work. They get paid for the value they bring. That value is driven by how they think, what problems they solve, and the level at which they operate. If someone earns 10 an hour and another person earns 10,000 a day, it's not just about the work being done. It's about the level of thinking behind that work. One is thinking transactionally. The other is thinking strategically, exponentially, and creatively. One is trading time for money. The other is using time to create money. Think about this. 2 people can attend the same seminar, hear the same information, and walk away with completely different results. One walks away and says, that was interesting, and changes nothing. The other walks away and applies a single idea that generates 6 figures. The difference, not the seminar. They see the strength of not the speaker, not the economy. It's the mindset. The one who took action, thought differently about opportunity. That's why money follows mindset. You attract what you believe. You build what you focus on. You receive what you're mentally and emotionally prepared to manage. Effort without direction becomes exhaustion. But when you align your mindset with purpose, value, and abundance, your effort becomes laser focused. You're no longer just busy, you're productive. You stop spinning your wheels and start building momentum. Mindset gives effort meaning. It directs your energy toward things that produce real results. That's when doors open. That's when people start calling. That's when resources start showing up, not because you worked harder, but because your thinking changed, and your thinking changed your behavior, your energy, your words, your confidence. When you operate with a scarcity mindset, you make decisions out of fear. You pass up investments. You climb to every dollar. You shrink back from risk. But when you shift to a mindset of abundance and growth, everything changes. You see money as a tool, not a goal. You start making decisions based on possibility, not just security. You see opportunity instead of obstacles. You start looking for leverage instead of labor. And in that shift, money starts to follow, not because you chased it, but because you created an environment for it to grow. You attract what your mind is aligned with. This is a principle that operates whether you believe it or not, because it's rooted in the way our thoughts shape our reality. The thoughts you consistently entertain and the beliefs you hold on to and the internal conversations you repeat day after day, they all form the foundation of your alignment. And that alignment acts like a magnet. It determines the kind of people you meet, the opportunities you notice, the risks you're willing to take, and ultimately the results you experience. Everything begins in the mind. If your dominant thoughts are centered around lack, fear, and limitation, and then your actions will reflect those beliefs. You'll hesitate, procrastinate, avoid calculated risks, and settle for less than you're capable of achieving. You'll overlook opportunities that are right in front of you simply because your internal radar is tuned to scarcity. On the hand, when your mind is aligned with abundance, creativity, and value, your entire worldview changes. You start recognizing chances to grow. You step into rooms with more confidence, you speak differently, and as a result, you begin attracting experiences and outcomes that match that new frequency. Alignment is not a passive state. It's something you create intentional thinking. You have to examine your inner dialogue and ask yourself, what am I aligned with right now? Because whether it's struggle or success, they see the strength of you're drawing it toward based on what you habitually focus on. If you walk around saying, I never get a break, your subconscious mind goes to work proving you right. It filters out anything that contradicts that belief. That's not just a mindset issue, it's a neurological reality. The brain is designed to seek consistency between what you believe and what you experience. That's why that people can live in the same environment, face the same conditions, and yet produce completely different outcomes. It's not the situation, it's the alignment. This is why personal development is so critical if you want to attract wealth. You can't just study money, you have to work on the internal programming that determines your relationship with it. If your mind is aligned with thoughts like money is the root of evil or rich people are selfish, then no matter how many business books you read, you'll subconsciously repel financial success because deep down, you're not aligned with wealth, you're in conflict with it. That internal contradiction creates resistance, and resistance blocks attraction. The key is to shift your identity at the core level. You must start thinking like the person who already has the outcomes you desire. That doesn't mean faking it. It means reconditioning your mind to expect, attract, and steward the results you want. You begin to ask different questions. You move from, can I afford this, to how can I create the resources to make it happen? You stop blaming circumstances and start taking ownership of your thinking. And as your internal alignment changes, your external environment begins to shift as well. The people who create lasting success understand this principle. They know that skill is important, but mindset is the multiplier. Two people with the same knowledge and resources can produce vastly different results based on what they're aligned with internally. One sees every setback as confirmation of failure. The other sees every setback as fuel for growth. That perspective doesn't come from the facts. It comes from alignment, and that alignment directs every decision, every outcome. Your mind is not just observing reality, it's shaping it. Stop thinking in terms of cost. Think in terms of value and return. This is one of the most powerful mental shifts a person can make when it comes to money, business, and personal growth. The most people are trained from an early age to associate price with pain. They hear a number, and their first reaction is, that's too expensive, without ever asking, what is the return on this? That kind of thinking keeps people stuck in survival mode. Always focus on what something takes, never on what it gives back. The mindset of cost is rooted in scarcity. It focuses on what you lose the moment money leaves your hand. It's the voice that says, I can't afford that. Or, that's too risky. Or, that's a lot of money. But cost in isolation means nothing. $1,000 investment is expensive to someone who expects it to return nothing. But to someone who knows it will generate $10,000 in value, that same amount looks like a bargain. That's the difference between poor thinking and wealth thinking. Not the numbers, but the perception of value and return. When you focus solely on cost, you close your mind to opportunity. You only see the price tag, not the potential. And that limited view affects every area of your life. It affects whether you invest in learning, whether you take the leap into a new business, whether you hire the help you need, or whether you expand your vision. People who are trapped in cost thinking say things like, I'll do it when I have more money, or let me wait until it's cheaper, or I can't justify spending that right now. But what they don't realize is that by waiting, they're often delaying their own breakthrough. The time passes, opportunities are missed, and nothing changes because the focus stayed on what was being spent, not what could be gained. Value-based thinking flips that equation. It asks a different set of questions. So, what is the return on this investment? What will this do for my growth? How will this save me time, generate income, increase my impact, or elevate my skill set? Value thinkers look at the long-term gain, not the short-term expense. They understand that money is a tool, and when usually it multiplies. Every dollar has a purpose, and that purpose is tied to return. This doesn't mean being reckless with spending. It means being strategic. It means training your mind to evaluate opportunities not by how much they cost, but by how much they're worth. Some people spend hours trying to save a few dollars, while others spend dollars to save hours because they understand the value of their time. One mindset is trying to preserve, the other is trying to grow. In business, this shift is especially critical. Entrepreneurs who think in terms of cost will hesitate to invest in marketing, coaching systems, or talent. They'll try to do everything themselves, wearing 10 hats and exhausting themselves in the process. But those who think in terms of return are constantly asking, how can this investment help me scale, save time, or increase revenue? They're not just spending, they're building. They see every dollar as a seed, and they expect a harvest. When your mindset is wired for value, you stop being paralyzed by price. You begin to see money as a means, not an obstacle. You make decisions faster. You take smarter risks. They see the strength of and you begin to attract opportunities that match your level of thinking. Because in the end, it's not about what something costs. It's about what it's worth to your future. Limitation thinking blocks innovation. This principle is one of the most underestimated truths in both personal and professional development. People often assume they lack resources, time, or connections, when in reality, the primary block is the mindset they bring to the table. Limitation thinking is the invisible ceiling that restricts potential, not because of actual barriers, but because of perceived ones. When your mind is programmed to see what you can't do, you don't have, or what's not possible, it will filter out every idea, strategy, or opportunity that contradicts that narrative. The human mind is incredibly powerful, and it operates based on whatever commands you feed it. If you consistently tell yourself, I don't have enough money, I'm not ready, or I don't know the right people, your brain will stop searching for creative solutions. It will default to comfort and safety, which means you'll recycle the same thoughts. They see the strength of the same plans and the same limited outcomes. This kind of thing doesn't just slow progress. It shuts down the very process that allows innovation to happen. Innovation is born in possibility. It thrives in environments where questions are asked with curiosity, not fear. Limitation thinkers ask, what if it doesn't work? Innovative thinkers ask, what if it does? That one shift opens the door to entirely different outcomes. When you assume there is a way, your mind goes to work looking for it. When you assume there isn't, your mind goes to sleep. That's how powerful mindset is. It determines whether you activate your imagination or deactivate your potential. The most successful inventors, entrepreneurs, and leaders are not the ones who had perfect conditions. They're the ones who refused to let their current limitations define their future possibilities. They looked at problems as invitations to think differently. They didn't wait for all the resources to show up. They created something valuable with what they had. That's what innovation is, using what's available in ways others haven't considered. But that level of thinking only happens when you stop obsessing over limits and start focusing on your options. People who think in limitations often seek perfection before progress. They wait for the ideal time, the ideal team, the ideal circumstances, and in the process, they miss their moment. Innovation doesn't require perfection. It requires momentum, and momentum is built by taking action despite the limitations, not by waiting for them to disappear. Every breakthrough is preceded by uncertainty. But when you have the mindset of growth and creativity, you don't need commitment. Limitation thinking is also contagious. It spreads through environments where fear is normalized, where doubt is disguised as realism, and where people criticize anything unfamiliar. If you stay around people who constantly remind you of what's not possible, you'll eventually internalize those beliefs. That's why who you listen to matters. Voices of limitation will keep you grounded in excuses. Voices of innovation will challenge you to rise above them. The moment you replace "I can't" with "how can I" is the moment you take your power back. Innovation starts with that question. It doesn't start with resources, talent, or experience. It starts with a belief that there's a way forward. Even if it hasn't been discovered, that belief pushes boundaries, experiments with new ideas, and unlocks solutions that were invisible before. When you train your mind to think in terms of possibilities instead of problems, you start to notice things others ignore. You start seeing patterns, making connections, and creating ideas that transform obstacles into opportunities. Wealth is created by solving problems, not chasing paychecks. This is one of the most fundamental shifts in thinking that separates those who struggle financially from those who build lasting wealth. The world doesn't reward people for showing up and putting in hours. It rewards people who identify problems, create solutions, and deliver value. Chasing a paycheck a person into a cycle of trading time for money. But solving problems unlocks the potential for multiplication, leverage, and impact. The traditional mindset teaches people to go to school, get good grades, find a job, and work hard for a paycheck. While there is nothing inherently wrong with employment, the challenge arises when a person becomes dependent on a paycheck as the only source of income and the only definition of financial security. That model is limited because time is limited. You can only work so many hours in a day, and there's a cap on how much someone will pay you per hour. The ceiling is built into the model. That's why so many people work hard and still feel stuck, because they're caught in a system that rewards effort, not innovation. Problem solvers think differently. They don't ask, how much will I get paid for this hour? They ask, what problem can I solve that people are willing to pay for? That one question changes everything. It moves the focus from input to output, from effort to value, from hours to outcomes. It opens the door to entrepreneurship, consulting, product creation, digital services, and scalable impact. Solving problems means understanding people's needs, frustrations, desires, and pain points, and then creating something that meets those needs effectively. Every major business in the world exists because it solves a problem. Whether it's a need for convenience, speed, communication, health, safety, entertainment, or education, businesses grow by addressing problems that matter. The wealth flows to those who can identify problems that others overlook and who have the courage to design and deliver solutions. The bigger the problem, the more value you create by solving it, and the greater the reward. Chasing a paycheck tends to make people focus inward. They think about job security, benefits, promotions, and retirement plans. Their entire focus is on what they can get. But wealth builders think outward. They ask, how can I serve more people? How can I improve some life or business? How can I create something that continues to deliver value even when I'm not present? That outward focus is where opportunity is born, because money doesn't chase need. It chases value. If you become a person who consistently delivers value, money will find you. Solving problems also creates leverage. If you solve a problem for one person, you get paid once. But if you create a system, product, or solution that solves the same problem for 100 or 1,000 people, you've just multiplied your impact and your income without multiplying your effort. That's the difference between working in a job and working on a business. One is linear, the other is exponential. That kind of leverage is only possible when your thinking evolves beyond the next paycheck and begins focusing on lasting value. Another key factor is ownership. When you solve problems and create solutions, you create assets. A product, a platform, a service model, these are all assets that can generate income repeatedly. Paychecks stop when the work stops, but assets continue producing. Wealthy individuals understand this distinction and spend their time building things that can work for them. They don't just trade time. They build systems, teams, brands, and intellectual property that create long-term income streams. They shift in mindset requires confidence and courage. It means stepping out of the comfort of predictable income and into the creative space of value creation. It means being willing to test, fail, learn, and improve. But the rewards are worth it, because once you understand that wealth comes from solving problems, you stop waiting for permission to succeed. You start seeing every challenge as a business opportunity and every frustration as a chance to create something valuable. You don't need more money to transform mind. This statement goes against what most people believe, yet it holds the key to breaking out of financial cycles and stepping into a new level of abundance. The default belief for many is that more money will solve their problems. They think if they just had a bigger paycheck, a better job, a sudden windfall, or some lucky break, everything would change. But time and time again, people who receive more money without changing their mindset end up right back where they started, or worse. A transformed mind is what gives structure, discipline, creativity, and direction to financial increase. Without it, more money simply magnifies what already exists. If a person is careless with $1 and wasn't dollars, they will be careless with $10. If someone is fearful with a small income, they'll be just as fearful with a larger one. The root issue is not the money, it's the mental programming behind how the money is handled. A renewed mind doesn't just see more money as the goal. It sees stewardship, multiplication, and impact as the priorities. That kind of thinking leads to lasting results, not temporary highs. Transformation begins by examining the beliefs and patterns that drive financial behavior. Most people were raised with limiting beliefs about money, often without realizing it. They were told things like, money doesn't grow on trees, we can't afford that, or rich people are greedy. Over time, those statements become embedded in the subconscious and shape the way people think about earning, saving, spending, and investing. Unless those beliefs are confronted and replaced, they continue to sabotage financial growth from the inside out. A transformed mind asks different questions. Instead of, can I afford this? It asks, is this the best use of my resource? Instead of, how much this costs? It asks, what is the long-term return? Instead of thinking in terms of limits, it begins to look for leverage. This shift is not about hype or motivation. It's about reprogramming how decisions are made, because every financial decision is a reflection of internal thought processes. When the thinking changes, the actions change. And when the actions change, the outcomes begin to follow. One of the clearest signs of a renewed mind is the ability to delay gratification and focus on long-term results. A transformed thinker understands that money is not just for spending, it's for growing. They don't chase instant pleasure at the expense of future stability. They prioritize as events over consumption, assets over liabilities, and purpose over impulse. This type of discipline is not rooted in fear or deprivation. It's grounded in vision and clarity. When the mind is transformed, the future becomes more important than the moment, and decisions begin to align with that bigger picture. Another aspect of this mental shift is the way risk is viewed. People with untransformed thinking see risk as danger. They fear loss and failure, so they avoid opportunities altogether. But people with renewed thinking understand that risk is a part of growth. They manage it wisely, but they don't avoid it out of fear. They know that nothing significant is built without stepping into uncertainty. The transformed mind embraces learning curves, adapts to challenges, and uses failure as feedback, not as a reason to quit. True transformation also produces confidence, not arrogance or entitlement, but a quiet inner certainty that you can create, adapt, and grow no matter the circumstances. That kind of confidence doesn't come from a bank balance. It comes from the mindset that created the bank balance. It's not about waiting for a better job, a better economy, or better luck. It's about becoming the kind of person who thinks, plans, and operates at a higher level. That kind of person doesn't need to hope for more money. They become the source of it by how they think, what they build, and the problems they solve.